Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch podcast, where I get to sit down with friends old and new and have honest conversations. Today, I welcome Nick Robinson to the front porch, one of my older friends, and it's so good to have you here. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, good afternoon, or I guess good evening. It's great to be here.
Man, it's been, I was thinking today, when was the last time we actually talked, with each other than email or Facebook? And it's been a while. So I couldn't figure out when it was, but it's been too long. That's the answer.
It's been
for
too
sure.
long. I think it was your honeymoon when you came out to Colorado.
I was wondering if it was the case. If that's the case, that's like 10 years now. So holy cow.
Well, that's the last time I think I saw you. I think we
Yeah.
spoke before that or after that.
But well, thanks again for coming on. And I usually start all my conversations with giving an opportunity for the guests to kind of tell the audience a little bit about themselves. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up, and maybe just a little bit about your childhood. Did you have brothers and sisters? What were you into as a kid?
I grew up in northern New Jersey, up near the Delaware Water Gap. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that area, but it's on the if you're in Pennsylvania, it's near the Easton area, Easton, Phillipsburg, Allentown, up by that way. Currently residing in Delaware. Grew up, have an older sister, two younger brothers, family of four children, both mom and dad there. It was a happy upbringing. A lot of good times.
So we got to know each other at college. That's where we met at Lock Haven. What brought you to Lock Haven? Like, out of all the places you could have went, this tiny little school in the middle of nowhere, central Pennsylvania.
Dart at a map. No, I had gone out there for a wrestling camp in the summer of, I want to say 96, it might have been 97, 1996, 1997. Enjoyed the town. The coaches were very personable, and it's not that they spoke up the university, but just their this was Coach Carl Poff and the Bonomos, but they just made me feel welcome, and I was like, you know what, I'm sold.
So we both were incoming freshmen at the same time, and we ended up being in the same dorm. That's how we really, met.
Good old Woolridge.
It was a crazy time. Both, kids from out of town, didn't really know anybody, for the most part. And we met, and our paths crossed a lot in college because we had a lot of the same classes and we had a lot of the same friends. We were both active with the international students. So tell everybody when you were in your undergrad, what was your degree in, and why did you choose that?
Originally, I came out there as a recreation major, outdoor recreation. I enjoy the outdoors, hiking, camping, just being outside. And I wanted to carry that over into working with other people, working with children in that sense. And then my sophomore year, I did an outward bound program in Colorado, and not one of the instructors had a recreation degree. They all had either English degrees, philosophy degrees, geography degrees. So when I came back to campus for my junior year, I switched my major to history, and that's what I studied. History, I'm a teacher now, but non-education, just straight up history, and enjoyed the aspects of colonialism. Had a couple professors that I really enjoyed, but that's what I studied, and it was one of those one of those turning point moments where I'm like, okay, I don't really need to do this. Okay, I'm gonna do something different.
So you graduated with a BA in history, and then what? How's the story evolve? Because how did you eventually make your way to becoming a teacher?
There's not much you can do with a BA in history. It was very limited. Very limited. I came back. This would have been actually probably 20 years ago this spring when we've graduated. It's taken us back a couple of years. I moved in with some friends and substitute taught, did construction, and worked at a bar, just a bunch of odd jobs. Then moved out to Washington State and was a reading teacher for students at that time. This would have been going into the first installment of No Child Left Behind back in, I think, 2003, 2004, somewhere around there. I was a reading teacher out in Washington State for students that families were primarily on the migrant farm path coming up from Mexico to California to Oregon, Washington State, and then back down again. Then moved to Philadelphia from there, taught there for a couple of years, then left teaching for a number of years, and then came back to it back around 2013 or so.
Was it something in those early experiences that you had either in Washington or in Philadelphia that said to you, this is something that I enjoy doing? And if so, like what, or what had you keep coming back?
I always enjoyed the aspects of the jobs that I had. I'd always get pushed into a default position where I was either the trainer or worked with the human resources departments and things like that. So training employees and those sort of things. And then when I left Philadelphia, I went back out to Washington State and worked for a company in Seattle, managing a department in a hospital. And then from there, I left that company, but they hired me up in Alaska for a short-term assignment up there, up in Denali National Park. And then I got a job out in Colorado working for a transportation company at one of the resorts. I fell into being I want to say a house dad at a school for students that were out in Colorado training for the Olympics or world competitions in skiing and snowboarding. And they kind of the students convinced me to head back to school. They said, Nick, at that point in time, I had a master's in education, but I had never gotten a official teacher's license. I had worked on what are they called? Emergency licenses. So they convinced me, they wrote recommendations for me. I applied to the University of Colorado at Denver and did their urban teacher program there and got a second master's in education.
So you moved a lot in that span of however many years it was. Is that something like, are you someone that is not you're not the kind of person to put roots down? Do you like that aspect of kind of being fluid? Is that something that you've always been like part of your personality?
We grew up, growing up, we moved back in, I want to say 1984, when I was about 4 or 5 years old. We moved from one house to the other house. And then that's the house I grew up in up until I left for college. And then from there, the summer after my senior year, a couple of friends of mine and I, we drove out to California, came back, and then went to Lock Haven a few days later. And I don't know, I broke it down once. For a spell there, I had moved just about every 6 to 7 months over a span of about 15 to 16 years. I mean, and some moves weren't like, they were across town. Other moves were across the country. I think the only state I haven't been to is California, and I've driven to every other state. And I don't think the only province in Canada I've ever not been to is just the Northern Territories. So I've driven across Colorado and then across Mexico as well.
But that's just like is there something about that constant moving that appeals to you? Because not everybody would enjoy that.
It's I don't know if it's the enjoyment, like looking back on it now in my early 40s, my wife and I will talk about it. It's definitely, I mean, it's given some strength within the ability to, know what I'm capable of. I don't know if I necessarily enjoyed it. It was more so just either employment wise or an opportunity came up and my tie downs weren't necessarily there. At that time, I wasn't married, didn't have any children, those sort of things. So the decision making was solely up to me. And also, family constraints weren't really there. Not that family didn't, care about me, but there was no mother, no father, no sister or brother saying like, no, we need you here. You're going to break my heart if you leave.
What did all that moving teach you? What did you learn from all those moves? What kind of things did that teach you? Skill wise? Oh, it's expensive.
I think now reflecting upon it and like in my current profession as a teacher, it certainly helps out a lot. Even when I was teaching, currently I teach in the elementary section, but when I taught in high school, just understanding what students are going through, understanding family dynamics, understanding those sort of things, and also just working with students and like understanding that there's other opportunities out there and letting them be aware of those things. and to let them know like, hey, I bounced around for 20 years. Yeah, I'd come back into teaching every once in a while, but just talking to them, like just a litany of jobs that I've had that, just so they feel like, oh, if I'm bouncing around a career, it's like, you can be, in your early 40s and settle down. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, your 401k or your Roth IRA might take a beating, but for the most part, you're
There's one thing I want to go back to, one college story that is important for me. I think, well, I think it's important for you as well, in that we were both together on the morning of September 11th.
True. Very true.
And every year on the 11th of September, one of us reaches out on Facebook and reminds each other, hey, we lived this together. What's your memories from that morning?
That morning, I mean, and they're shared memories, but they're, in a sense, they're through my lens. So looking through my eyes and you're looking through your eyes, coming to class, we were up in the, I'm visualizing the building. I just forget the name of it. I hadn't had any classes in that building prior to that. I forget the name of the building there in Lock Haven. I actually don't know if it's still there, but just, somebody letting us know that there was an attack. And then I forget if we went to class. I think we went to class, and then the professor let us know that, hey, we're most likely going to be going to war soon. And then we went to the library, went downstairs, found a TV, and we watched it for a bit, I believe. And then I remember going back to our apartments, and somebody had put a TV up outside and they were watching it. I remember the next day seeing it in the New York Times, the towers. Actually, I still might have that copy. But even now, I mean, I don't want to say that I wasn't affected by it, but I'm affected, I think, more by it now than I was in my early 20s, just reflecting back on it. And I think that's looking through it as the lens of a father, a husband, and just as an adult. Not that I wasn't an adult at 22, 23, but the world looked different then.
I have to agree with you 100%. And the one thing, now, early on in my career, I would have students who were alive when it happened and maybe even had memories of that day. But as my career has gone on, I mean, now for the last couple of years, I've been teaching kids at the high school level that were born after 9/11. And I always, I tell my story to all my kids, or a lot of them will ask, well, what were you doing on, September 11th? And exactly what you said, I remember all those things. And the story that my students nowadays always find amusing is that you and I had to go find a TV. And because we both thought, well, there's TV. We knew there was a TV in the library, so we went to the library and had to walk across campus, get to a TV to get live coverage news.
Right.
My kids, thinking even for us today, we kind of think, geez, all we would have to do is pull out our cell phone,
that's it.
Yeah.
And even the TV we found, it was in the basement, so it had to have a cable hookup. We knew that rabbit ears wouldn't have worked if it was upstairs. If it was upstairs, we'd be perfect. Just throw an antenna on it and we're good. That whole world it's a different world. And I think I was talking to a peer of mine a little bit ago. I think our generation, the late Gen Xers, and nothing against millennials, and I'm not talking about generations, but I think that time period of about I would say probably 78 to about 82, right in there, we're the last group that grew up prior to the switch to the internet. Yeah, there was email and stuff like that when we were going into college, but nobody used it. We used to have to call up, to get our classes. We had to get, the phone. You had to get them. We were, if you're a freshman, you may be able to get one class, if you wanted. Otherwise, you're just, hoping for the gen eds that.
And that was if once you got into the phone call, you actually typed the right code for the class that you wanted.
No, I didn't want that one. And those were things cell phones didn't necessarily, work. It was call and collect. I still, I'll not necessarily tell my students, but some of my peers at work, I would just dial the operator, call up my parents, collect, and it would be Mom and Dad, I need to get picked up. Will you accept a collect call from Mom and Dad? I need to get picked up. No, I won't, but I know where my son is. Those sort of things. Or even I remember walking into the library with the Stevensons and just asking, where's the card catalog? And the librarian, this is, I think, going into my junior year, maybe my senior year, and the librarian goes, it's on the computer now. And I'm like, I can't process that. I don't know what that means. I need the physical card catalog to go look up the subject that I'm going to look up.
What I find teaching now is I'm kind of in that, you and I are both in this generation, there's faculty members that I teach with that are older than us. that are really, not as tech savvy. We'll just say that. And then I also teach with faculty members that are younger than us that grew up completely with the internet. And I find myself often in the middle. I can help out some of the older faculty members when they have a tech question, but there are times when I do have to turn to younger faculty members to get some tech help myself. I find myself kind of stuck in the middle often. I don't know.
It's just that it's that end of a switch there in the generations, because even the generations prior to that, I think they shared more in common with previous generations, whereas, moving forward for us, not so much. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the electric lights that we're using, they've been around functionally like this for maybe 100 years, so prior to that, like there wasn't much generational shift. Like even like I'll talk to my dad, he was born in the mid 40s, early 40s. So when the year he was married, we landed on the moon. Like, and I look at like from the time he was born, we had dropped an atomic bomb to today, where we're sending people to space, just like it's, or even beyond that, like cell phones. I'm like, that technological difference is definitely real. And the times have gone by quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to shift the conversation to an aspect of your life that I find absolutely fascinating. I've always found this fascinating. I want to start with this question. When was the first time you went to Africa and why?
So first time I went to Africa was in 2008. I have two brothers, like I said, and a sister. My youngest brother, he was in, he's a Marine. So once a Marine, always a Marine, but he's been out of the Marines for a few years now. He left as a captain, and my other brother was in the Peace Corps, and he was stationed in Morocco. And I had done AmeriCorps, so we all joke that we were in the Corps together. Different corps, and the Peace Corps brother and I, we usually laugh about it. The other one laughs too, but he said it was a little bit different corps. But but the one brother in Morocco who I went to visit, one time when we were having a conversation, he and I I apologize. 2008, I went to go visit my brother in Morocco. That was the first time I went to Morocco. So it was when I was leaving Denali. I left that job. It was the end of the term of the contract. So I left that job, had about a month and a half, 2 months before the other job started. So I drove back to the East Coast and then flew out to go visit my brother in Morocco. I flew to London and visited one of our old friends, John Borman, out in London for a couple of days, and then flew over to Morocco and spent about a month and a half with my brother there. That was the first time I went to Africa.
But it wasn't the last time you went to Africa.
It wasn't the last time.
Let's talk about Africa. Is so high on my list of dream destinations, and many parts of Africa, not just like one or two. There's quite a number. But most Americans have a concept of what they think Africa might be or is. And then there's many Americans that have really no concept of what Africa is. Now, you've been to Morocco, as you said, but tell the listeners a little bit about some of your other trips to Africa and what took you those times.
So there is a difference between Northern Africa and then Sub-Saharan Africa. So coming across the Mediterranean, coming across the top part of Africa, the deserts and things like that, and it's a much different complex than Southern Africa. So in 2016, I was offered a job teaching in Kenya, teaching and tutoring in Kenya. And I just jumped at the opportunity. I had been living in Colorado prior to that, and then moved back east. I moved back east before this school season started. So I was teaching in Colorado, and then moved east. Got a job working at a school for about a month and a half prior to leaving, and then went to Kenya.
Okay, I have to stop you. So you get this opportunity for this job in Kenya. And what is it about this job on paper that said to you, I want to do this? Because that is a huge move. It's one thing to take a job if you're living in Colorado and to say, oh, I was offered a job in Pennsylvania. I'm going to move to Pennsylvania. You're moving, within the United States, two different cultures for sure, West Coast, East Coast. But to say I'm in the United States and this job opened up in Kenya, a country you'd never been to, and you said, this is something I want to do. What about that made you say, yes, this is what I want to do. And as a follow-up question, were you nervous? Did you have any qualms about doing this job, or were you 100% I'm in?
So I was actually in Nepal just prior to going to Kenya. I was there for about a month and a half. The only qualm I had was if the opportunity was legit. So I got hired to be a tutor for a family, for one of the children that had some reading difficulty. So just for the listeners, I have a background. My teaching licenses are in history and pretty much all the social sciences. So psychology, economics, those sort of things. But for the last several years, I've been teaching special education in the K-12 environment, currently in elementary. Work a lot with behavioral students and on all aspects of that, but usually the behaviors usually stem some sort of other ailment. And I was working with this. I got hired to work with a student there, so it was pretty much just wanting to know if it was a legit job, and they paid for the flight there. I mean, I purchased the ticket, but they reimbursed me. But it was one of those where I needed to make sure that the reimbursement was legit, that sort of thing. So, but no, I had a few interviews, and then they checked my my background check. Not a criminal background check, but they checked my references, and I checked a few of their references, and then followed up with my references just to make sure that the person was legit to fly over there. But no, the only qualm was to see if it was legit, and that wasn't so much about being worried about getting there. It was more so about having to come back and have to look for another job, which I knew I would have gotten, but because I knew it was a one-way ticket to Kenya, and if it didn't pan out, I could spend a couple of days there and then fly back. It wasn't the end of the world. It was, would it legit. But as far as being at that point, like, flying into getting kidnapped or something like that, I've been around a lot, and that's never, like, when I've been to Nepal, Costa Rica, and things like that. That's never, not saying it's never occurred, but it's not been like a, like, oh my goodness, like I can't do it because I'm nervous because of those things. But I mean, not to say I'm cannonballing in with no plan.
So for the listeners, describe Kenya for us. What's that country like? How big is it? Where were you in Kenya that first time?
So I was in Nairobi's the capital of Kenya. So Kenya is a East African country. So it's on the eastern side. So it's if we were to leave this area of the planet, the east coast of the United States, we would sail directly into West Africa. Kenya's on the other side of the country. The climate in Nairobi is 60 to 80 degrees every day. Nairobi itself sits at around 6,000 feet. So think Denver, Colorado would be pretty similar. It's not a high desert area, so it's still pretty lush greenery wise. Roughly, Texas is maybe about the same size as Kenya, give or take. Maybe Kenya's a little bit bigger. Population wise, I think it's around like 40 million to 60 million. I could be off by that, but not off by a tremendous amount. There's 54 tribes in Kenya, and it's social democracy similar to ours. They have a parliamentary system. Do they have? Actually, I'm not sure if they have a parliamentary system. They have a president, but very, very similar to us. They're a former English colony, so that's why I said a parliamentary system. They do drive on the opposite side of the road, but anything that you could find here, you would find there. Minus, their outlets are, a different setting, but anything you could find here, you can find there.
So what culture shock did you have when you got, as the time that you were spending there in this first job?
So coming from Nepal, I was in Nepal just prior to going there. I came back to the States for a week, went up to up to the Lock Haven area, entered a 100-mile running race. Didn't finish it, got about 70 miles in before I was like, yeah, it's probably not the best idea. And then went to sleep. And then maybe 2 days later, I flew to Kenya. So the biggest culture shocks for me were immediate. Actually, we're coming out of the airport. So somebody came to pick me up. If not, I would have taken one of the buses out of the airport. But coming out of the airport, driving into Nairobi itself. So the airport there is an international airport. It's Jomo Kenyatta Airport. Jomo Kenyatta is the first president of Kenya. His son's the current president, actually. His youngest son, or I don't know if it's his youngest son, but not nepotism. More think of like a Bush, an Adams type situation. There's a national park that sits near it, and there are some zebras, not in the airport itself. It's not like you're going to get off and you're going to see it, but a national park not too far off. So leaving, I think I want to say I saw some zebras, but I'm not 100%. It's literally just going back, but all of the posters, like the billboards on the highway, everything looked like my wife and my children. So advertisements, everything like that was all African. And that was like the first apparent thing to me, like, and it's one of those things, like, it makes sense. Like, it's, why would they be marketing to a white population? It's, so that was the biggest, like, immediate, like, difference that I saw right away.
And then this family that you worked for, how long did you work for them?
I worked for them for a few months. So I was working with them for a few months, and then the child's physician, I got a couple other teaching jobs, just because there wasn't an abundance of people there that had my specialty. And not that I'm, by no means am I an arrived teacher. I am learning every single day. But I just, the particular skill set that I had wasn't there. And so the family physician, they wanted me to work with his son, who had executive function, some deficits there. So just, some frontal lobe things. When you put this up, if anybody has any questions about what those are, they can always reach out. And I'll give you, actually, we started a YouTube channel, so I'll give you that name of that at the end. He wanted me to work with, he wanted to introduce me to the school that his son went to. So they introduced me there, went up. I didn't realize it was an interview, but it was an interview. So I had walked there. I walked everywhere in Kenya. And it was about 4 miles. And I just walked. I was like, I'll just leave a little bit early, head up there. So when I got there, white people don't walk in Kenya, they drive. And I know that's a huge generalization. White people do walk, they have legs, things like that. But if you visit there, there's definitely a line of demarcation between the haves and the have-nots. And for me, it was definitely, I think it was a culture shock for a lot of Kenyans, seeing how I operated. But I got there, and I didn't realize it was an interview, so they were just asking me some questions about my background and things like that. But they had a couple students that had some reading difficulties that they weren't able to, I don't want to say they weren't able to work with, but they just wanted to give me a shot. So I got hired there to work part-time, and from there with a couple other families.
So let's transition now. You already kind of mentioned, you spoiler alerted the fact that your wife is Kenyan. So how did that come about? How did you meet her, and what was that process like? Because I definitely have a couple follow-up questions.
So I went to Kenya in my late 30s, single, never married, no children. Came back with a wife and a kid. So the lady that hired me, I was staying with her. They had a guest, like an ensuite. So I stayed there, and it was part of my salary. And they called them, one of her employees, they call them house girls or house boys. She was by no means, she's our age. So she was in her, at that time she was around 40, late 30s. So she's by no means a girl, but that's just the term that has stuck, I think, from colonialism. And she would be the person that either, cooks, cleans, those sort of things. Some families have different people that do that. Labor is very inexpensive in Kenya. So a lot of families that come over from the West, and families that, and well-off families in Kenya, Kenyan families, they'll hire people to work for them, take care of the kids. Same situation as here, as the United States, within daycare and things like that. And, one afternoon when she was getting off work, I just wanted to go see where she, because we would talk, because we were, for the most part during the day, for the first month and a half there, I'd be working with a student in the afternoon when she came home from school. So during the day, it was just me and this other, my now, I guess my wife's aunt, just hanging out. and I'd help her out. She was so weird with learning. So I was like, okay, so let's go back. So I went to where she lived, but she had to go pick up her son first. Now, unbeknownst to me, my wife was watching her son, and her son was she has 3 kids, but the youngest son was about, I want to say a year old, right around there. And my wife was just watching her because my wife had a daughter as well, still has a daughter. And when she came out, holding her, I guess, nephew, cousin, or yeah, her cousin, I was like, who is that? And just wanted to hang out with her more. And roughly 4 months later, we got married.
Okay, so that's an awesome story, but here are my follow-up questions. Looking at it from an outsider's perspective, having never been to Kenya, having never been to an African country myself, how difficult was it for you to enter into a relationship with an African woman? Thinking even from like the cultural differences, were you welcomed by her family? Was there a time where it was like, what is this white man doing with our daughter? Or what was that
There's
like?
only one time, and it wasn't what is the white man doing with our daughter. There was only one time that it was ever an issue, and it wasn't like a bad issue. It was an entertaining issue. But no, it's very similar to the United States. Like there's no issues. So I mean, as I'm saying, like for the most part, like culturally, yeah, there's huge cultural differences that we have, and even still my wife and I have. There's language differences, there's different ways of doing things, but no different than any culture between, in the United States from, geographic areas, or I'm sure when you go visit Germany, there's things that people just do differently. So those sort of things. Like our marriage, we didn't get a traditional my wife is her tribe is Luya. So like I said, there's 54 tribes in Kenya. Her tribe is Luya, and they have a particular way of doing things that's different than the other tribes. And so for our marriage, like, there's a dowry and things like that. My family didn't attend the wedding. Granted, it was, they were in the United States, I was in Kenya, and it was a relatively quick process. Not the wedding wasn't quick, but the to come to the United States, and we can talk about immigration, in a little bit. But the from the time that we met to the time we got married, it wouldn't have been conducive for the family to come. And they were going to come, but we moved back to the States. So it was, I think I still owe a dowry to her mom, or family. But I keep trying to get them to invest in like rabbits, something entertaining. They put up with me, but no real cultural differences. We, yeah, like
and you were, I don't want this to come off sounding, I don't know how it sounds, but just this idea, like, were you welcome from the start?
Yeah, 100%, right from the start. And not just by her, but by her community. It was because I moved out of the, when I stopped working for the person that hired me, and through it was just, what the student needed and what I was able to provide. It just didn't work out. But through no fault of, either of ours, the student didn't have, as large as, didn't have as many issues as as was needed. And they had made some great balance. Like, if that makes sense. I don't know if the listeners will understand, but, within the education field, like, it's not like I can't keep charging somebody for a service that, in a sense, I'm not providing and it's not needed, like everybody, it's like, no, if they're doing fine, like, yes, I could use the money, but it's like, I don't need it that bad to make up what I have to do. So then we moved, my wife and I moved in together. We got what's called a bed sitter above where she was living with her family. So bed sitter is basically just a one room apartment. So it has got a little sink in it. We were able to get one that had a bathroom in it. So it had the bathroom and shower in the bathroom. And that's where we lived with our daughter. But no issues. I would have, like, we lived in it would be called a slum, but we lived in a slum in Nairobi.
So even like if you went out grocery shopping with your wife and you had a mixed race couple, did you get weird looks, or is it just people didn't even give it the time of day?
No, we were also in a large city. and those sort of things, it'd be the same as like being in New York City, like nobody's really going to pay attention. And in our area, not so much. I mean, it was definitely different. It wasn't the norm by any stretch of the imagination, but people are people, and they understood that. Like even just walking around, like it was it was fine. I never had an issue walking around, because I'd leave for work around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't get home until around 5, 6 o'clock at night. And Kenya's pretty much right on the equator, so it's 7 hours of daylight, 7 hours of nighttime, pretty much on the clock. Sun rises at 7, sets at 7, so it's necessarily 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. But no, no real issues. There wasn't anything like that for me. I don't know what people were saying to my wife, because my wife speaks upwards of 4 different languages. She speaks English, which is a language that's taught in school, Kiswahili, which is the general language that everybody speaks in Kenya. It's more a trade language that comes in from the coastal area. She speaks Luya, which is her tribal language, and she speaks a particular type of Luya, because even within, and you probably know this as well, being a German teacher, there's different dialects, and you could probably tell where somebody's from. They're not within Germany, but you can tell where they're from. So there's different dialects of Luya, and this is an American's interpretation of, and I am not doing it justice. So, and she speaks some Kikuyu as well, which is this is gonna come off. I don't know if you have any Kenyan listeners, but Kikuyu is the main tribe in Kenya. I don't know if it's the largest tribe, but I think it's the largest tribe. But it's been the tribe that's been in state, so they haven't controlled state. I don't want to imply that they're that it's a one, but Kikuyu's it's the main tribe. If I don't know if that makes sense, but they've Jomo Kenyatta was Kikuyu, his son's a Kikuyu, so she speaks a little bit of Kikuyu, and I think that was just from being in Nairobi. But generally when she's around, she just speaks Swahili. When she goes out to Western Kenya, where she's from, she would, like, if her grandmother was there and things like that, she would be speaking in Luya. And that was a funny story. So when we went up to go visit her grandmother for Christmas, when we were there, and in Christmas, everybody basically goes back to their tribal areas. Not everybody, but generally. And where we were, the kids get together, they reenact the nativity scene. Everybody goes to church all day, and it's like a huge day of festivities. And their education system runs January to December, so it starts in January and ends in December. Every 3 months they get about a month off, which is not, I mean, that's actually, I was like, that's a genius way to do it. So around Christmas, they don't necessarily give presents like we do. They don't have Christmas trees. They exist, people know what they are, but usually kids will get like school uniforms and school supplies, because school's starting up in a few weeks. But I got up one morning because her grandmother had some cows, and her grandmother is like a traditional Luya. She's a traditional 75, 80-year-old grandmother, and she saw me out there milking the cows, and she was just pelting me with rocks. She's like, because I was a guest, not because she thought I was doing anything, but she's like, what are you? And she's yelling at me, and I was like, I don't know what this lady's saying. I was respectful. I didn't say that. I was like trying to dodge rocks and get back in the house, because no guest of hers is going to be milking the cows at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I've never milked a Kenyan cow. What this is like.
It's great. I'm envisioning this whole scene that you're telling. I'm sure it was funny. So let's fast forward a little bit. Now you and your wife and her daughter, and now you both had a child together. Now are back here we are back in the United States. What precipitated the move back to the United States?
The way the immigration system works.
Okay, so let's break this down for the average American that probably has no idea how this system works.
It's entertaining.
Oh, okay.
So, and this is I am not a United States Custom Immigration Officer by any means. I can only speak for our
but you have an experience, right? Exactly. You've experienced it on that end. And I'm curious to hear what that was like.
So when we got married, we were married in Nairobi. So we were married in Kenya. We have a Kenyan marriage license. And we wanted to come back and visit the United States. And then we found out that basically the only way that my wife could come to the United States was through a certain visa that basically has the name of a green card visa. So it's the permanent residency green. And since we were married for less than 2 years, in order to get that, there's a condition on it. So it's a 10-year visa, and she can travel back and forth, do whatever she wants during that 10 years. But the first 2 years of it, since we hadn't been married for 2 years, the first 2 years, she would have to spend the better part of a year in the United States. So the first year, 6 months in a day, she can come back to Kenya. Second year, 6 months in a day, come back to Kenya. And then that restriction's lifted, and not lifted, I mean, it's a process. And then she gets to remain on it. And they don't necessarily, I mean, the United States, my country, doesn't necessarily give visas out willingly to certain countries. And I don't mean certain countries like Kenya's on a watch list or anything like that, but somebody from England, France, they can just take their French or English passport, hop on a plane and come to the United States, no questions asked. Even probably, I can't say anything, stay overstay visas or anything like that, but they basically have like a visa. Usually they get like 6 months or something like that before they have to head back. And I don't know, 6 months could be off, but for a lot of other countries, it's a very, very difficult process. And it's an expensive process. So I had to leave my job in Kenya, a different job. I'd gotten a different job as a special education teacher at a different school, to basically work into being like the director of special education. And then they were talking about expanding up into upper schools. So they were up until like 8th grade, and then they wanted to do up into high school. So for me, the goal was to help them build that. So I had to basically leave that, and we had to move to the United States. We had to shut down everything and move to the United States. And I'm not saying that like that is not a bad, like, oh, woe is me. It wasn't like, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just a different trajectory than the path that we were on at that particular time. And it's not like it's not like my wife and I, it's not a bad thing by any means. It's not, throwing rocks at the US government or like that. It was just a different process than we had foreseen. And mainly because I didn't know much about the immigration process.
So you came, and then even though she was the wife of an American citizen, there was still a lot of red tape.
Yeah, so it's and I must say the United States Custom and Immigration people, like, and this is something I tell everybody, so even your listeners, they are the nicest people on the phone that we've ever, like, that I've consistently ever talked to. Like, whenever, like any bureaucracy sometimes takes a little while to get through to them, but couldn't be nicer about helping us out. And I don't mean helping us out like doing anything, but just, it's a nervous process. So just being, very relaxed on the phone, like letting us know the information that we needed to know. The forms aren't overly complicated to fill out. I mean, basically, if you have a high school education, you can, fill out the form. It's no different than going to like a doctor's office and just being like, answering yes and no questions, putting down the correct addresses. Did you live here during this time? Did you live there during that time? But it's a matter of getting all the background paperwork, their bank statements, bills, everything like that. All the information that comes with it. If you've bought a house before, it's very easy to fill out the process form, but everything that goes with it, it's cumbersome.
So I'm going to have you kind of speak for your wife a little bit, as you guys came back to the United States and got a job and settled in and found a place to live. I'm sure you had pillow talk conversations with your wife at night. What kind of culture shock did she experience moving here to the United States?
A couple of things that she brought up, and granted, this is her husband speaking on her behalf without her permission. So she does not like it when I do that. So pillow talk might be, her pillow talk yelling to me as I'm sleeping on the couch. So I might have couch talk from now on. A couple of things she noticed right away is the seeing poor white people, like beggars. We moved to Philadelphia, so seeing beggars, and not that they don't have beggars in Kenya, but usually it's different because and here so there's a word for white person in Swahili in Kenya. It's called a mzungu. It just basically means like a white person. That's a rough translation. It doesn't actually mean that, but that's basically what it's become to know. So it was interesting for her to be in Philadelphia and want to see beggars, but they're different than they are in Kenya. So Kenyan, like people that, live on the street and like people, they are like poor people, usually either severely disabled or in a sense severely mental illness. Like, it's not that those things don't exist in those areas, but, and not that people don't help each other in Kenya. They have a very large communal system and they do help out people with disabilities, things like that. But these might be people that have lost. So it's, you know, for being in Philadelphia, to seeing people that don't necessarily have any, you know, visible disabilities, or, you know, or in a sense, like, you know, that, and this is, I'm speaking for my wife. So that was one of the biggest things. And also going to like restaurants and seeing like servers and things like that were white. Cause those are just, and it's not that she didn't like, she wasn't aware of it. It's just like something, same thing with me when I came to Kenya. Like, first thing I saw, like, oh wow, there's no white people on billboards. Duh. Why wouldn't there be? You know, a similar thing. Like, well, yeah, duh, they all live here. Why wouldn't? But for her, whenever she went to a restaurant, there were no white people serving her.
Right.
The only white people she would see would either be people on vacation, on holiday, or people that worked in, you know, the United Nations, or, you know, businesses like that, you know, well-off people that are going there for work.
And then she also got to experience different weather too, snow, for example, and cold.
We were talking about that. So our daughter loves snow. Like, the first time it snowed, like, I took her outside, and like, and we lived in Center City in Philadelphia. So we lived in the heart of Philadelphia. My wife hated the cold. Like, the first time she went out, she just like, she gave me daggers. She was like, what world do you bring me to? She's gotten used to it since then.
Yeah. But this story has a real happy ending, in the sense, of course, your marriage is still great and everything. But if I think I'm correct in saying this, that your wife recently became a U.S. citizen.
She did. In early December, she became a U.S. citizen.
So what does that process look like for somebody?
So the actual process, we did ours in Delaware, either Philadelphia or Delaware. The immigration office is in Philadelphia, but there's a district court in Delaware. So we were able to do it there. COVID restrictions, I couldn't go in, my children, we couldn't go in, but they let us film outside, take pictures, everything like that. Everybody had masks. There was a judge, basically just like any courtroom, there was a judge presiding over the ceremony. They had some people that were former immigrants that had gained their citizenship speaking, and they took their oath of office, or their oath of allegiance, and they passed out their certification cards. My wife changed her name, so she got her name changed. And the judge couldn't have been nicer. He was nice. He was a nice judge. He was basically saying that he summed it up basically. He goes, it's not every day that judges, you know, get to preside over, you know, something as beautiful as, you know, the immigration ceremony. He goes, usually we're dealing with a lot of different things that have such happy endings. So he understood it, and he did it before. He's like, it seemed like it was one of those things, like when those come up, like they jump at the chance to be able to do that.
What did your wife have to do in order to become a U.S. citizen?
Put up with me for years and years.
Well, if that's the case, I'm a U.S. citizen too. I did that for a couple of years.
So the process right from the get-go was applying for the green card, and then from there, doing like the medical checks, everything like that to get into the United States. After 2 years, recertifying the status, and then waiting another year, putting more documents up, basically providing that we're married. So shared documents, birth certificates for children, school records, bank statements, all of that. She had to do more biometric testing, which would be fingerprints. Then going to Philadelphia, taking the citizenship test, which is out of like 100 questions, and they'll ask everything from like who the first president was to who the current speaker of the house is, you know, who the senator is from your state. So it could be, you know, random question, what's the largest river in the United States? So everything, you know, in those sort of things. Not partisan questions by any means, but, you know, general knowledge questions. And then after that, it was we had to submit more paperwork to show that we were still married, because it was about a year and a half from when we've put in the application to when when her exam was, when her test was. So they just wanted to basically make sure that we're still living together. And then,
did you ever have to be interviewed by immigration?
So the initial interview, the initial one in Nairobi, when we interviewed there, that one, the three of us went to. My daughter, she was there, but I didn't necessarily have to be there for that, but we didn't really know the proceeding. So so we went for that, and they misplaced our application. So we were one of the last people to go. And so the lady, she was missing her lunch, so she wasn't overly thrilled with us. But like I said, they were all nice. I mean, she, you know, not to say she, you know, she wasn't rushing through everything, but you know, she didn't tell us she was missing her lunch. You know, one of the other ladies that came up was like, oh, we just grabbed somebody, we just get them back from lunch. You know, that was she couldn't have been nicer. It wasn't, you know, we had done nothing, you know, wrong, but it was just entertaining because we were thinking, oh my goodness, we're gonna, is she gonna get mad at us? Like, can we get somebody else that's already had lunch? Because you're just nervous at that point. But even then, as we left the interview, she said, "You guys got your visas. They mailed them to us." So we left that meeting knowing what was going to happen. But like I said, it's an expensive process. We just filed the application for our daughter because she gets it through my wife, her citizenship, and that was $1,100 for her application. So my wife was the same. The initial ones were $550 each, and we had to pay for the medicals, which was $300. And I mean, I think all in all, it's probably around like 15,000, give or take, for, so it is an expensive process, and that's just for us living here. So it's, and for the route that we took, it can be more or less for other people.
So what's the future looking like? What are the plans for the Robinsons?
So, like I said, we have a YouTube channel. It's the Robinsons and Inyangu. My daughter's her last name is Inyangu, so it's the Robinson and Inyangu family. Please look it up on YouTube.
Well, I will put a link in the show notes for
Perfect.
everybody. Yeah, absolutely.
I always mess up on it because I think I'm supposed to like and subscribe. Is that
subscribe and like?
Edit this out if I don't want to be underselling. It's like, subscribe, and something else, but I always mess up on it. But I'll send you that. It's the Robinson and the Yangi family. But as of right now,
well, what are you doing with this YouTube channel? What's that all about?
So what we'd like to do is we should have done it earlier, just talking about the immigration experience. But I don't want to sound as if I'm paranoid, but it was when we moved here, there was a lot of things going on in the government, the United States government, where people were saying that they were going to be checking people's Facebook statuses, that, this was right at the time of the family separation, and, they were separating families. So for me, I just wanted to do what was best for my family. So we didn't really talk about the immigration process that much. We talked about it with, immediate people, but we didn't really, branch out in a talk. So looking back on it, I would have liked to have, videoed and done those. So we'll probably do it for our daughter, like what the process is for that. But my wife likes to do some Kenyan cooking. So those sort of things. And then just general what it's like to be in a mixed race, mixed cultural family, just, the ups and downs of it. No different than really any other family, but just kind of like, not like the glamorous stuff. But for me, that's, what I'm looking at as is just to let people know, like, hey, this is how people live. This is what it's like to be married to somebody that, comes from a different country, a country within Africa. And like you said at the beginning, like, I think people have their stereotypes of what it's like to be from there. Cause my wife gets it, your English is great, and so you have cars there, and those sort of things. Or like, oh, you moved into a slum. How dangerous was it? And it's like, there's children there. Why would people live in an area like and that's one of the things, like, saying, like, the amount of traveling that I've done, like, that's why I never worry. Like, it's because, like, yeah, there's children over there. Like, why would parents in any culture not, like, let their children play in an area that's dangerous? Like, it's like there's kids there. It can't be that dangerous if the children are outside playing. Like, if there was no children outside in the area, I'm like, I probably shouldn't be here either.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me one up and one down of living in a mixed race marriage in the United States right now.
Right now, the ups are, it's become definitely much more socially acceptable. I can definitely think if it was, a generation ago or even 20 or 30 years ago, definitely, it definitely would have been different. A down is, I guess sometimes people just not understanding. Like I'm privy to some conversations that people don't know my wife is Black, and they'll say something and I'll be like, oh, okay. And somebody's like, his wife's Black. And they'll immediately either get angry at me for not telling them, or they'll get very like, oh no, I didn't mean it. It's life. Like, it's not like, it's these things, not that these things happen, but you're showing me who you are. But like, if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. Like, it's stuff like that. I don't want to get into a huge political, thing on it, but those sort of things. But as far as, I don't really see too many downs. There's a lot of positives, it's a lot of positives.
I'm really happy to hear that. I've thought a lot about you and your wife and your children and what kind of transition it must have been like. And I'm always hoping that it's always been positive interactions that you've had wherever you guys have been, because
Yeah,
there are a lot, there is a percentage of our population, and this goes in any country too, that would not be welcoming of the situation that you're in, or would be very skeptical or questioning everything, or
mm,
even aggressive in some instances. So I mean, from this conversation, I'm hearing that, you guys have been, luckily you've been around people that have not been that way.
I think people, even in the current climate, generally, on the individual level, are in a sense good-hearted people, but either are good-hearted or know that they, in a sense, like you probably shouldn't say those things, and they don't say them. I think it's more so like the mob mentality, or if we get posts on YouTube and stuff like that, that we haven't, but that can be derogatory and things like that. Like if you toss yourself up in the public eye, or if you're out there, people might say something, but generally people don't say anything, to our face. They might have their own opinions, but they're polite enough to keep them to themselves. Which is, and I think that's generally across the board, most people. But there are things that I'm learning as a white man in my 40s, that I have to be open to, that I didn't necessarily have to think of, in the past. Like even something as as taking my daughter to a dermatologist, like for me, or something like that, or those sort of things, like, oh, what's going, it's like, no, it's not questioning those things, but like being around people, like, okay, how many people do you see with this much melanin in their skin, because what you're prescribing isn't working, or braiding hair and things like that. So those sort of things. But my wife and my family, they're not, in a sense, they're not Black American, they're not African American, they're not, it's a completely different culture. Like it's a completely different culture. They're Kenyan. So they didn't grow up with the history that we have in the United States, with Black and white relations.
Just
So it's
one quick question I just thought of while you're talking
do
about
we only
that.
have an hour? I'm sorry.
Oh, no. That's fine. Has your wife run into situations where African Americans have come up to her automatically thinking, of course, that she is African American, and then find out that she's African? And has she had like those kind of cultural exchanges as well?
I mean, I'm sure she has. I mean, she does, like I say, she speaks with an accent. I speak like with an accent to her. Um, but I think to a degree, but not so much. Like not to something that I've seen it being, like a problem. Even for me, like when people find out that, like, oh, you're married to, a Kenyan, like they'll say like, what's that like, and things like, but nothing. I think it's more questioning as like a wanting to know, like, oh, what's like, what's like, not just people asking like, do you have cars there, but general, like just inquisitive people, like, oh, you cook, you cook kale, so you cook lentils. Well, how do you do it? Those sort of things, or what's it like there? Because I generally am interested. We do run into a lot of like my wife would say Black Americans, we say African Americans, that want to come and visit, want to go to the continent of Africa, want to do those things. But generally, a lot of they would be going to Western Africa. So there are a lot of people. There are a lot of Kenyans in Delaware, but there's not as many people from East Africa. So it's a different size of Africa. But even like, watching The Lion King, like that's all Swahili. Like Rafiki means friend, Simba means lion, like Pumbaa means like dull-witted, Hakuna Matata means like everything's okay. Like those are Swahili words.
That's a good way to end this segment. Hakuna Matata. Nick, I close every conversation the same way with 10 quick questions that I ask all my guests. And I'm really looking forward to your answers to these. I have an idea what you might say to some of them, but I'm really interested in some of the others. So here we go. Number one, what is your morning drink of choice?
Usually have coffee.
Kenya grows coffee, correct?
It grows coffee. Just about everybody drinks tea, though.
Okay.
My mother-in-law got me a small little coffee maker.
Is that a leftover of the English presence in Kenya, that it's a tea country, even though they grow coffee?
They grow coffee. They grow a lot of tea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they grow a lot of tea. Up in like right just outside of Nairobi, there's huge tea plantations. So a lot of tea, but generally everybody drinks tea. They call it chai. Everybody drinks tea.
Okay. All right.
If you were to go there, like you would like somebody would put the kettle on for some tea, and it's not English tea. It's heavy milk tea.
Okay. Interesting. Number two, who is a musical artist or group, a go-to musical artist or group for you?
Oh, geez.
I'm thinking of the 19, 20-year-old Nick and what he might say, but now that you're 40, things change.
Let me see. It depends. If my daughter or my son's with me, whatever they're listening to, but like if it's me, I grew up on a lot of punk rock, so it'd be something in that venue.
Sounds good. Sounds good. What is a movie that you can watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Oh, I used to do that a lot. I really enjoyed The Thin Red Line. Came out in 1998, right around the time of Saving Private Ryan. So that's a movie that I've watched a bunch of times. Or there's a movie called Baraka that came out. There's no words to it, but those ones I've watched over and over again. But I haven't watched the same movie over because unless it's, I don't even know, Thomas the Train or something like that. Like that I watch a lot.
I hear you. I hear you. Okay. What is the last thing that you read?
Last full book that I read, Nationalism and Cultural Practice in the Post-Colonial World. I just finished it.
How dry was that? Or was it pretty good?
It was pretty good. There were some aspects. It was good. I mean, not all of it was great, kind of breeze through some things, but for the most part, it was good. My master's thesis was on education in colonial Zimbabwe.
I read that thesis.
Yes, you did. That's right. That was a while ago.
Yeah. I remember you sending it to me.
That's what I'm interested in. So I still do read that when I get a chance. That book took me a while to get through because of the kids. Not necessarily, it wasn't dry, but it just took a lot longer than I was hoping for.
Yeah. All right. Number 5. What's your favorite pizza topping?
Pepperoni or sausage.
Is pizza something that's in Kenya, or do they have their own version of it?
So they're not a heavy cheese state. State of the country, but they do have pizza there, so you can have the Burger King, Pizza Hut, those sort of things. They have other, my wife really likes pizza. My daughter, not so much. She does eat certain things from the United States, but generally she'll still eat. So ugali is a traditional meal there, which is like a corn maize, skuma, which would be like a kale spinach type cooked, and chapati, which is a kind of like an Indian chapati, like a bread. And lentils, beans, and things like that. But yeah, they have pizza there.
All right. Number 6. I think I know the answer to this. Laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Hike.
Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, I knew
Unless it was a hike on the beach.
Yeah. Sounds good. Great. Number 7. You've invited me over for dinner. What are you cooking?
Oh, it would be something my wife cooks. If it was just the two of us, it'd probably just be some pizza or burgers. But definitely, it would definitely be probably ugali with some chapati, some lentil soup, and then some skuma, and probably some kuku, which would be chicken. And then if we could find it, beer of choice in Kenya is Tusker. I think it's a Pilsner, but nothing. But just so you can taste that.
I've had the opportunity to eat some African food in the past. I don't know if I've ever had Kenyan food or not, but I definitely had Ghanaian food, and I've had Ethiopian food. And I know every country, has their own cuisine. But I would be there in a heartbeat if that stuff's all on the table. Oh my gosh, that'd be delicious.
Ugali is similar to, I think, Nigerian, probably Ghanaian fufu.
Okay.
It's a similar stuff. I think it's probably basically the same. Just sometimes they use different type of maize.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds delicious for sure. Now, you've been a lot of places. So this next question I'm really interested in. What is a dream vacation destination of yours?
To head back to Kenya. We want to go back. My family went back last Christmas, so probably head back, go back to New Mombasa. Ideally, what I'd like to do is take my family to Rwanda, Spain, to go back there, head to Nepal, and then come back to Kenya.
Do you need someone to carry your luggage? Because I would love to do that too.
It's expensive, so it's not something that, like, I don't want people to think that I am insanely well off. Like, it's not. It's like that is a dream vacation.
Right. No, I hear, but still, if you need someone to carry your luggage, I will gladly do that.
If it's a dream vacation, you would just be with us with your family.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, that's true. Let's make it happen. All right, number 9. This one I've thought a lot about this. Given how I know you, and just from this conversation, the listeners kind of get a sense of the kind of person that you are. But what's something that you're afraid of?
For a while there, it was my family getting deported. Like it was, immigration not working out. That was the biggest, that was the biggest fear.
Were there sleepless nights through
Not
that
necessarily
process?
sleepless nights, but it's in the back of your mind because it's, you're submitting things and, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. Even though you know what the outcome's going to be, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. And, because anything can happen. And not that my family's nefarious or anything like that. It's just, it's the process and it's left up to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right now, my biggest fear would probably be, I don't know, not outliving my kids. Like I want them to outlive me. That's
Right.
probably my biggest fear.
That's a great answer. That's much better than spiders or snakes. All right, last question.
I don't like spiders.
Yeah, okay,
I'm not terrified of them.
You've had a lot of jobs, so this next question is also a good one. Number 10. What job, other than one that you've had, would you love to have?
Oh, other than one that I've had that I'd love to have. I've had a lot of jobs. Probably just retirement. I think that'd be the best job. Like to wake up every day and be like, what am I doing today? And then just step out the front door and just see what happens. Like if that was a job, I guess a retired person, just like to get up and not have to like worry. Did I change my kid's diaper? Did I put it on crooked? So I have to go clean the bed now? Like what? Like,
I love it.
Yeah, I think that would be it. Or like, I don't know. I don't even know. Like what would be the best job, dream job? I couldn't think of one. Something that wouldn't last forever.
Retired person is pretty good though. Yeah. Nick, it has been an absolute pleasure to be able to talk with you again. And I was glad to be able to talk about this stuff that we talked about this time, because I've been, following you and been in conversation with you for a long time. And I truly value our friendship, our relationship that we've shared. We were together through those really important years for a lot of people.
Very
where we're trying to,
years.
Yeah, exactly. Where we're trying to figure out who we are and what we are and all these things. And I'm glad that I had that part of my life with you. And I'm glad that we've been able to maintain this friendship. And I wish you all the best in the future with everything with your wife and this whole situation. But thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you for sending me the invitation. No, I've definitely been following you and listening to your porch talks, and they're definitely entertaining. It's nice to be invited into that fold, but likewise, we met when we were 17, 18 years old, and here we are in our early 40s. We didn't have any kids then, weren't married, and now here we are. Both of us have children, both of us, in a sense, dealing with things as fathers, as husbands, meandering through life in a very similar profession, different fields, but basically the same profession, and just doing it. So it's definitely an enjoyment. So I appreciate that.
Well, thanks so much, Nick. We'll talk soon. Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on My Front Porch.